Okay. I like that Dave comes late to his own chat. Mike, I think I just brought you up. Can you hear me? Can you get on up?
Hey there. Sorry about that.
No worries. And we're gonna give Dave a second to come and we'll get this going in a second.
Yeah, I just texted him telling him to get in here. So
I know he's probably in front of the mirror figuring out which bandana he wants to wear.
yeah,
Right.
yeah, he's always late to these things.
No, I mean I actually like this one. Normally we keep these closed and it's exclusive for timepiece holders. And then tonight, because it was the first one of the year, oh, there we go. Because it was the first one of the year, and also because we did the photo drop yesterday with the photo vault. Like we didn't and the photo vault drop, is doing really well, with everyone. We just didn't know what to do, and so we just thought it was the right thing to do is just open it up to everyone, and thought it would be a fun experience. And so, for everyone that is joining us, just so you know, this will go an hour or so. I will read. I'm on my cell phone as I do this, but I'm on my computer in the Q&A. So if you have questions, please feel free to post in the Q&A, and I will direct them to Dave or to Mike. I do have a first question, Mike, to you. Do you prefer Mike? Do you prefer ill? Do you prefer ill concept? Like, how do I address you? I want to respect.
Anything works for me, really. I like them all, but we can
Oh,
just stick to Mike if you want to keep it formal.
okay, so what's the origin of ill concept, if you don't mind me asking?
So it was actually back in AOL Instant Messenger days, my AOL name. So I just brought it forward to Instagram when I started photography.
Really?
Yeah, it's been a
Do you
long
know?
time.
I love how nonchalant that is. Like, I asked Fuck Render once because Fred is like one of the nicest people on the planet. If you've met him, I was like, how, like, what's the origin of Fuck Render? And he was like, I just kept on looking at my computer as these renderings were taking place and screaming to myself, fuck, render faster. And fuck render just stood the test of time for him. And he's like, had he had known, he would have never done that as his thing. But it's like such a memorable thing. And I feel like ill concept is the same sort of thing.
Yeah, it was kind of cool. Like, back then everyone had the aliases and stuff, and then when I started Instagram, everyone kind of had the same thing, like last suspect and whatnot. And I was thinking like, what can I use? It's like, oh, ill concept is really cool, and it's kind of like I grew up skateboarding, so there was a skateboard company called Natural Concept with a K, and ill was always just kind of cool to me, so I just kind of combined them. Um, and then when photographers taking off on Instagram, then like everyone started using their real name, like Dave Krugman on Instagram, and I started thinking like, man, it sucks that I don't feel as professional because I'm hiding behind this alias. But now with Web3 and like Twitter and everything, and I kind of love it again, having an ill concept.
I think it's memorable. I think it's kind of awesome. But I'm going to call you Mike because I feel like I'd call you ill. I feel like I'd call you ill, and I feel like ill would be very weird throughout the conversation. So if it's okay, we're going to go with Mike. Is
Yeah,
that fair?
totally fair.
I might change my mind halfway through it. Dave, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing great. I wore a headband for you.
What color?
Blue.
Blue was the leading color, right?
I
Uh,
know. I can't
it
just go
was.
against the community.
I'm just saying that the community voted, the community spoke, and blue was what people wanted to see. So I feel like we're 5 minutes in. We have 90 people in the room. It'll probably continue to grow a little bit more, but like I feel like we should kick it off. Um, I love this. Here's a little alpha for everyone. Uh, we're not gonna disclose our next drop yet, the theme of the next drop, but what we did say in our first town hall was twice a year we were going to do what we feel is like our quintessential like franchise drop, which is we're going to collaborate with 40 artists, 40 incredible artists, and we're going to choose a theme, and all of the artists will work against that theme and give their interpretation of that theme. I have very, very proudly leaked a few of the artists so far. One of them is Dave Krugman, who will be participating as one of the 40 artists that are in our upcoming drop. And his piece, which we won't talk about tonight, because we don't want to give away the theme just yet of everything, is so beautiful. But one of the things that's really important with these franchise drops is that Time invites in 20 artists, and then the 20 artists get to invite in 20 artists, right? So everyone gets one invite. And when I asked Dave who he wanted to invite, he said he wanted to invite Mike. And so none of you knew this tonight. And if you did, then you're like, kudos to you, or we have a leak somewhere. But illkoncept will also be one of the 40 artists that is participating. And I'm really excited. If you don't know his work is so beautiful. And I want the room to get to know both, Dave and Mike as individuals, what inspires them. And of course, throughout the course of the hour, if you have questions, please post them to the Q&A. And so, Dave, do you want to start with you? Like, do you want to give the room a little bit of your background? Like, who are you? Like, what inspires you? What draws you to bandanas? Tell us a little bit about yourself.
All right. Well, first of all, I'd like to start with my first AOL screen name, which was Davey Wavy. Like, no numbers, no nothing. I had the original Davey Wavy. And at every other internet paradigm shift, when I got to make a new username, the first name I would check is Davey Wavy, and I was always too late. So that's why I'm Dave Krugman. Because nothing else would do. I was very proud of that. In third grade, I had AOL, and I was chatting with my friends as Davey Wavy. So that was very important to me. So I feel you, Mike. Second of all, yeah, no, I'm very thrilled. So my father actually was the head of information technology at Boston University. So I was always very early to all sorts of different technologies. Like he would bring home, the early Macintosh computers and everything like that. And so as I had AOL in third grade, I was doing instant messaging, and that understanding of technology and the evolution of interconnected communities and networks is something that's always been with me. But this era of that kind of mechanic is the most exciting that I've ever lived through. And I really do feel like, this is cliche to say, but I really do feel like we're just getting started here.
And let me ask you this, and I actually agree with you. Like, I think that we are at the beginning of something big. And like, there's this Churchill quote, which is, are we at the beginning of the end or the end of the end? All I know is that we're at the end of the beginning. Like, and maybe that's where we are. But before we go over to Mike and we hear sort of his background, like, how did the two of you know each other?
Through Instagram.
Really?
So yeah. So Mike, I think you might have a better version of this story, honestly. But I know that you came over to my apartment in Brooklyn with our mutual friend Elizabeth Wieland. I think that's the first time we actually met in person.
No, you got the story wrong, but it's okay. Yeah. Or no, you're right. The first time we ever met, yeah, I guess that was. I was thinking back when we first met, like at the Narrows, the bar. But you're right, we did meet before that. I just feel like we officially connected when I moved to New York just 3 years ago. Dave and I knew each other through Instagram for years, and I feel like I know a lot of my close friends now in New York through Instagram. Before I even met them in person, I feel like that was like an early start to getting acquainted with the photography community all through Instagram. So I moved here to New York 3 years ago, and Dave was one of the first people I reached out to, and I believe he was in Japan, but then he took the time to meet up with me, and we just like played chess and had a couple beers, and it was great. And since then, we've been pretty good friends. So it's been really cool.
And where did you move from, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, I grew up in the Midwest. So I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Okay. And Dave, you grew up in New York City?
I grew up outside of Boston in a town called Needham, and I moved to New York the second I was able to. I actually skipped my own graduation ceremony at Boston University just to get here a couple days earlier because I'm just ever since I was a kid and I visited, I used to skateboard through Central Park, and I just remember thinking like I need to live here, and I do feel like New York has, I call it a dark gravity, where for certain creative types they just kind of fall into the orbit here and they just something draws them. It feels like this again, this dark gravity, like the center of a galaxy. And I always felt like my whole life, ever since I knew about New York, I was orbiting it. And I, when I was old enough to finally get here, I just felt right into the center of it.
It's so funny when I hear people talk about that. I grew up in New York City. Um, I grew up on the Upper East Side, and growing up, like I thought I was like a really tall human being. Like I'm 5'9", just so you have an idea. I was like taller than my entire football team growing up. I thought all women were like 5'1". And it wasn't until I went to college that I realized that like all these people did not grow up in New York City, that like people from the Midwest, like from Milwaukee, Mike, were like 6'5", that women could be my height, right? It was like a real mind fuck. But like I came back, and it's always so interesting because all of my friends that I grew up with in New York City have moved away. And all of my friends now are people who have those type of stories, Dave, that like you said, that sort of gravitate like people towards it. And so like when I look at your photographs, like both of your photographs, because you photographed New York City so beautifully, like what is like, I'll throw it to you first, Mike. Like, what's your inspiration? Like when you go out, and I'm just like looking at your Instagram feed right now, and like and you decide like you're gonna capture like New York City or the essence of the city, like how, like what inspires you?
Well, a lot of things inspire me. Something about New York, like the first time I visited here in 2015, like there was an energy that pulled me in, and I wasn't even really into street photography when I came here. I did like more cityscapes, like architectural and just different genre. And like something about coming here and just seeing stories unfolding between people on the street, and just, every corner had life to it, and just something just drew me into that genre of photography. So like coming here was really what sparked my interest in street photography. Aside from that, like I take a lot of inspiration from either like sci-fi films to like almost have like a futuristic perspective to it, or on the contrary, I'm like really inspired by old New York photos, like back when it was a different era, like 70s, 80s New York, all the classic street photographers. Like I'm like, I just am fascinated by those old images, and I'm always looking back to that. And I feel like I kind of, I love to document the present day too, but like those are kind of what motivates me, like looking at these images to go and document it myself.
Do you ever think to yourself that the same way that you're looking at the way a photographer captured the city or the essence of the city 50, 60, 70 years ago, that somebody will look at the way you captured the city and will be equally as inspired? Or like do you think towards the future as much as you look towards the past, or do you just live in the present as you take your photos?
Both, but that's a very interesting point. Like we discussed this a lot, because a lot of street photographers, they look away from people using phones because it looks boring. Everyone just has their head down on their phone, or who has headphones on, or even like right now with everyone wearing masks, like a lot of photographers don't really want to shoot that because it takes the emotion away, because you can't see the facial expressions and whatnot. But if you do fast forward 30, 50 years from now, these are going to be historic moments, because you can see the technology evolving. Like not like there's going to be something after phones. Like phone, everyone buried their nose in their phone is going to be something in the past in like 30 years. So it will just take time to see what these images really mean. But yeah, I just try to document everything really.
And before I jump over to Dave for a second, do you mind me asking just to clarify for the room, and it's grown, to about 131 people now. It's like when you say street photography, like how do you define that genre?
It's kind of borderlines documentary photography. So I prefer to document candid moments on the street. So basically, you're taking photos of strangers. It's a little bit intimidating and scary, but I like to do it in an artistic way and in not an aggressive way either. So it's kind of like I try to be invisible in the crowd and kind of get these moments in, but it's kind of storytelling through images, candidly, and like in a documentary way.
And Dave, would you classify like a lot of your photography as street photography as well?
Yeah, absolutely. My interpretation of street photography is um, capturing a decisive moment at the confluence of different circumstances. So basically, I kind of look at the world as this beautiful, ever evolving, chaotic, generative artwork. And the duty of the photographer is to kind of observe it, freeze moments like microscope slides, and pull them out and present them back to a curious society. And then in terms of street photography, like my definition of what is kind of allowed is like I don't think if you start moving things around and like cloning out objects and people and composing that shot, I don't really call that street photography. I just call that photography. But street photography to me is like a pretty strict interpretation of like just documenting what's in front of you with a tool you have in your hand, and then the most work that you should be doing to those types of shots are like color and contrast and sharpening work. But I do love the idea that you have to allow the universe to present you with a moment, and the skill is about being in the right place at the right time and making the right decisions about how you capture that moment.
And you just happen to, and I don't mean this jokingly. I mean I mean this like serious, because I think it's some of the most beautiful work. Like you love capturing moments in the rain, right? I mean, like,
yeah.
So and why?
Well, a couple reasons. First of all, I'd love to say that photography literally means painting with light. Like that's the root of that word. And when I think about how many different ways there are to paint, there's that many different ways to photograph as well. And photographing in the rain is like watercolor. The light, the water bent like affects the light in such a profound way. And I really love the way that looks. And it's just something I gravitate towards too. Like, if you're looking at Radio City Music Hall or something like that, it's a beautiful scene nonetheless. But on a rainy night, there's almost a medium in the air, which is the rain that's constantly recycling itself, and that holds the light in a really interesting way. Whether it's in the air, in the actual like drops, so you can see beams of light coming through it, or it's running through the rivulets in the side of the street, pouring into the sewer drains. There's the color is like still in there as well, and so it kind of creates an environment that is really cinematic and vibrant, and I'm really attracted to it. Beyond that, though, it's kind of it's a more rare condition to get to like some of our lingo and crypto art, but a lot of people don't like being in the rain. And so very few, relatively few people go out and like get activated creatively when those conditions are tough. And so I get to create moments that a lot of people, are cozy at home, and I'm in this more rarefied air, so to speak. And I get to bring back moments that are more unique than, a sunny, beautiful day or a sunset or something like that. So that's two of the reasons I really do enjoy it.
I love this, and by the way, I love. Thank you to the participants in the audience. There's questions that are beginning to flow in, and I'm going to throw the first question out by actually a timepiece artist from our Genesis collection, John Mavradas. He asked the both of you this question. He said, "I feel the idea of photographers as documenters of history, consciously or not, is so important. with the influx of the pocket camera that floods society, how does that change both of your mindsets about what you choose to document?
That's a great
So,
question. If you don't mind, I'll answer first, then pass it to Mike. Um, it's funny when I think the most ubiquitous camera is the smartphone camera now. And basically everybody has a camera that has, if you have a phone, you have a camera. I know not everyone in the world has a smartphone, but for the sake of this conversation, let's just say, it's very ubiquitous. When that first started happening, there was kind of a division in the community. It's like, oh, if everyone's a photographer, no one's a photographer. And I think that couldn't be further from the truth. I think that it's the best thing that's ever happened to photography, because when you are able to participate in a craft, it deepens your appreciation for that craft 1,000-fold. So, when I was early to photography in the 90s and early 2000s, nobody really cared when I showed them my photos. I worked so hard to make these photos that I really loved. Now I look back on them and I think they're a little ridiculous, but that's another conversation. But I'd show them to my friends and they're like, yeah, okay, cool. We're watching the game, man. Like, leave us alone. But the second that everybody started participating in it and everybody needed to have a visual voice online, all of a sudden those same people developed a tremendous amount of respect for all the work that I had put in and the quality of work that I was able to create. So it's one of the best things that ever happened, in my opinion. Now, in regards to photography as a vessel for historical moments, this is actually a very interesting topic, and it's very interesting right now in the context of blockchain as well. It's not that photography will become less important because more people are taking pictures. We're just going to have more images than ever before. And the way that we decide what is important and what is our shared history is actually a decentralized community consensus about what's important. And before social media and before blockchain technology, we had institutions that helped us do that. Time Magazine is a great example. The images that have graced the cover of Time Magazine over the past 100 years are the moments. These are the moments that are kind of codified in our human history. And Time and other media helped create this consensus, right? It's a more centralized consensus. And now in the age of social media, we're doing the same thing with historical images, but it's a much wider decentralized consensus. And I actually think photography itself is a form of blockchain technology. So that's my answer. And I'd love to kick it to Mike for his opinion as well.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add to that. That was a very good answer, Dave. You have such a good way with words. Going back to like the 70s, I remember a lot of the photographers I admire were saying like it was not cool to be a photographer. Like people thought they were nerds. Like it was not like a cool thing to be a photographer. So I think it is really cool how everyone is kind of becoming a photographer and developing an eye for it, which helps all of us photographers as artists because they appreciate our art that much more. Like I have an aunt back in Milwaukee who loves doing street photography with her iPhone, and that's something that I never could have thought of many years ago. Another thing about people being worried about oversaturation of photography coming into the market and like, what are we going to do with this? Like the fact that all of the advertisements and everything are turning into rotating digital LCD screens just proves that we need more media than ever to fill all these advertisements. So I think that it's like a great time to be a photographer in general.
It's so funny. Dave and I have actually spent the last 3 nights in spaces together. When you think about that, Dave, I was realizing that tonight as I was thinking about this conversation. And one thing that constantly comes up is, like I think it's definitely the best time, and photography is definitely appreciated, but like prior to sort of the rise of Web3, photography was not valued properly, right? And like what we're seeing at this moment is the ability to revalue photography and other great artwork as well. There are some other great questions in here, and I want to actually throw this out to both of you. And Mike, I'd like you to go first on this one. Even though it was addressed to you, I think it actually is equally as applicable to Dave. It's from Dano Photo. And the question is how has your understanding of street photography changed as you evolve? Are your ideas about style and process fluid, or do you just try to work to a certain ideal?
Go ahead, Mike.
Yeah, I feel like my style and my views on photography or street photography is always changing year by year, just by how I evolve as a person. Like I just left the country for the first time this last year thanks to NFTs, and like my mind has just been changed so much in just the last few months from that. So like everywhere I go, it's just like changing my perspective on photography, and I bring that back into my work. So um what was the other part of the question?
Sorry, I couldn't get to my mute button fast enough. My unmute. Are your ideas about style and process fluid, or do you try to work always towards a certain ideal?
Oh, well, when I'm out there, it's all like instinctual. So if I'm out shooting, I don't, it's almost like a state of meditation. Like I just photograph what I find interesting. So whether it's a person's outfit on the street or like a good moment, or even just like sometimes it doesn't have to have people in it at all. It's just like basically my it's like shoot first, ask questions later for me. Like it's like I just gravitate towards whatever interests me as a photographer. Dave, you can take over from here.
Cool. Yeah. So I really about process. It's really interesting. I love writing as well, and I find a lot of comparisons are very valid between writing and photography. For this particular question, I'll use the example of a vocabulary. So your vocabulary is kind of your toolbox for how you can construct words and things that can stimulate other people's imaginations and can kind of be like a foundation and a scaffolding for stories. In photography, your vocabulary is like your toolkit of techniques that you have. And every time you learn a new technique, you can combine it with any of the other techniques that you already have in your toolbox. Just like you can combine any new word in your vocabulary with every other word and create sentences you could never create before. So I'm just constantly seeking out and experimenting through trial and error new techniques to add to my creative toolkit. And so let me just name a few of these. Like there's a couple of things we can do. Panning is one. Like if a car is going by you really fast and you have a slow shutter speed, like 1/30th or 1/20th of a second, if you can match the speed that your camera moves during the exposure with that passing car, then the subject will be very clear and the background will be very blurred, and you can create a sense of motion. You could also learn the techniques of reflection. So if you get your lens really close to a reflective surface, you can create a mirrored image, right? Like try this with your phone sometime. Like put your phone up to any piece of anything that reflects at all. Put your phone lens like right up against it, like look, perpendicular to it, and you'll create a mirrored image, right? So if you can just get enough of these, like let's say you have 10 of these techniques, like as you move through the streets, you're constantly like looking at the scene and being like, which one of these techniques can help me tell the story I'm trying to tell at this very moment? And so that's kind of how I think about it. And I move very fluidly. I kind of have these things I fall back on, like these techniques, but I'm always looking for the next technique that I can add to my creative tool set as well.
I love it, and first off, thank you both for the great questions. And known token, I saw you asked a question. I saw you pulled the question back, but I'm going to actually ask the question if it's okay, because I thought it was a really interesting question. Specifically because, and thank you for acknowledging that in the Q&A. We built out timepieces, and then we broke out the communities into general, and then photography, painting, illustration, CGI, and 3D tech, and time memes, which just always crack me up and the team up, right? But like we really wanted to be able to give subgroups for people to sort of go to learn and to get advice. And I know that the photography community within Timepieces is really active, specifically because of the partnership that we have with PhotoVault. And Known Token's question was really, if the two of you could give, a little bit of advice to someone starting out in the field of photography, like what would be your advice, like to get going?
That's a great question. My advice would absolutely be just do it as much as possible. Just participate in the craft, and every time you press that shutter button, you're going to learn. I had really no formal training in photography. I went to college for psychology. I just loved it. And in between moments, and when I had a job in advertising in New York City, a lot of my favorite shots I got on my way to and from work and at lunch break. Just every single time you participate in anything, you're learning more about that thing. So you might think, oh, I need to spend money and I need to get an expensive camera and all this gear. That's the biggest trap in the world. My collection, my most successful collection in NFTs so far is a project called Drive. I shot that on the entirety of that project is shot on iPhone, and from iPhone 4 to iPhone 12. So the best camera is the one you have on you. Just get started. The best way to grow a good body of work is to set constraints for yourself. I'll use the example of Drive again. I basically chose a certain set of rules, and then every time I found a pattern that matched those rules, I would take a picture. And after 10 years, I have hundreds and hundreds of cars that all fit this wider pattern, which is perfect for collections as well. So whatever your constraints you want to set for yourself, those constraints will help you, progress on your journey. Because without the walls that you put up for yourself, there's really no way to get to your destination. You're just kind of wandering through this, the ether. So that's my tips for getting started, is just do it a lot and set some constraints.
Yeah, I'm also self-taught. I don't have any education with photography. I used to film skateboard videos, so I guess I had a camera in hand, but I never started using manual camera settings until I just dove in, and I was obsessed with shooting. I remember being late to my family's Thanksgiving because I was exploring abandoned buildings and couldn't get back in time. I was just super dedicated. So kind of going back on what Dave was saying, just shoot as often as you can. And also I would just say just to be yourself and shoot what you like. It's really easy to get consumed in social media and other platforms where if your photos don't get enough likes or whatever, you start to just kind of shoot for that platform to please an audience. So you might not enjoy shooting a certain genre as much, but it gets the most likes, so people start kind of just falling into this trap where you're shooting to please others. And I think it's really important to just stay in your lane. And I love gritty street photography, kind of like Gotham City vibes. It's a little bit darker, and it's not I love graffiti and stuff. It's not for everyone, but I share that stuff all the time. And I think with Web3 coming too, it's also it's just important to be yourself, and we're kind of leaving those old ways behind, and we don't have to be pleasing algorithms. And I think it's just really important to create and express yourself the way you want to, regardless of how it performs on social.
So first off, I will you should see in the comments. I could definitely see how much appreciated both of your answers are. Struglord had a question, and then he, tried to pull back the question. But Struglord, I'm not going to let you pull back the question, because I actually think that the question's a really important question, which is, and I'll rephrase it for you. What's your advice to someone? And Dave, you said this in the beginning, right? That you worked in advertising, and I know, from our previous conversations, that you worked doing social media campaigns for companies. What's your advice for somebody who's been photographing for a while but hasn't made the leap into this being their full-time job, right? And how would you say you should go about doing that?
It's interesting because technology moves so quickly that the path I took is closed probably. But there is never, I don't this goes back to what Mike was saying earlier, which is a really good point, and him and I discussed this a lot. But every screen you see is an infinitely refreshing canvas for your work. So yes, the supply of photographers is higher than it's ever been, but the demand for photography and content, as people like to call it, is far exceeds the supply. So there's never been a better time to be a photographer, not even counting what's happening with Web3 and NFTs and everything like that. The best way to make the transition from an amateur to a professional, which I honestly think are just words, but for the context of this conversation, it's important to distinguish, is you need to identify where you can add value. And if you can identify where you can add value, then you will always have work, and you will always, get value back, which could be money or whatever you want to earn to call yourself a professional. There's a great book by Walter Isaacson. It's the biography of Benjamin Franklin. Benjamin Franklin was a very incredible person. I'm not gonna wax poetic about that right now, but I'll tell one story that he told in the book. And there was a young kid in Philadelphia who asked him for advice. He said, I'm out on the street. I have no skills. I have no ability to get any work, and I'm really desperate. Like, what should I do? And Ben Franklin said to him, take this broom, go to the print shop, and just start sweeping. Don't even ask. Just start sweeping up. And if they ask you, what you're doing, just say you want to help. And so the kid goes in and he starts sweeping and sweeping. And I'm going to fast forward to the story, but the point of the story is, eventually, he got an apprenticeship, and then eventually he became like the master printer at the print shop, printing all the important pamphlets and newspapers after a few years. Now, the point to that story is that if you just make yourself useful and available, and you find where there's a little bit of an opportunity for you to give value to some certain ecosystem, then inevitably you become indispensable to the functioning of that ecosystem, and the value will flow back to you. So I've been, tweeting this quote out all year, but to say it again for the people that haven't heard it, if you add value before you ask for value, you'll never have to ask. Now, to apply that practically to the craft of photography, the biggest need for photography right now is probably small businesses that are trying to recover from the hurt of the pandemic, especially restaurants. Something I've been doing, and Mike has helped me many times doing this, is going to our favorite restaurants and just volunteering or trading for food, just like a nice meal. We'll shoot their whole menu. And then, so now they have social media content for months, and we get a fun free dinner and drinks, and get to like throw a little party for our friends. So we added value, we get value, and everybody's happy. And then that restaurant, I'm not in a position where I need to, get a lot of work like that. But if I was, and this is how I started, then that restaurant would tell all their community that, oh, these guys are great. They did our whole menu. And inevitably, the more you can insert yourself in those ecosystems and add value, the more opportunities and jobs you get. And if you can just layer that up over the course of a few years, you'll be a professional in no time.
Oh, I love that. Mike, yeah, you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, I can keep it quick. My approach was very, very different, and I've only been professional full time for around 3 years. But I was working shit jobs in Wisconsin, and I told myself if I
Wait. What's a shit job in Wisconsin? Because you have to remember,
well,
I grew up in New York City. So when you say a shit job in Wisconsin, like I think you're on the farm scooping shit. Okay, so it's
I
like
don't want to
define
talk
a
time.
shit job in Wisconsin for everyone. Oh, by the way, before you go, La Barba Roja in the comments, Mike just wrote, "We just bid on Mike's piece. Congrats, love you, brother. Let's get this
Oh my,
going." So I just want you to hear
Let's
that.
oh my
I
gosh.
love. By the way, I love that. These are my favorite aspects of these type of talks. And please, to the community that is listening, we have 186 people listening right now. If you have questions, like Dave and Mike have been so incredible with their answers so far. Keep going. And Cheese wants to know what piece you bid on. So if you could please let everyone know, that would be awesome. So Mike, turn it over to you. Define shit jobs in Wisconsin, and then tell us your story on professionalism.
Okay, well, first of all, thank you, Benny. Appreciate you so much. Love the trio. Love everything you're doing. Thank you so much. I don't want to say what job it was because I don't, in case someone else is working similar jobs, I don't mean to call it a shit job. It was just, there's dead end jobs that don't pay well. I was doing photography on the side for 5 years or so, just as a hobby and like kind of getting freelance gigs here and there. But I told myself if I turn 30 and I'm still working this job, I'm gonna move to New York. I'm gonna save up some money and I'm gonna do it and I'm gonna make it. And this is definitely not advice to anyone because this is a very ballsy approach, but I did. I saved up some money. I rented an Airbnb in New York for a month. I I always love the quote, like you're the sum of the people you hang around, or like the 5 people you hang around. So my plan was, I was friends with all these people on Instagram. I love New York photography. I love the scene. I love the community here. Like I've always been fascinated by it. Like in Milwaukee and Chicago, there's a community, but it's not like the family I felt here whenever I visited. So I came here and I just kind of infiltrated the network that inspired me. And I reached out to people via DMs and all the people who were doing the jobs that I wanted to do. And I picked their brain and I got involved and I said, hey, I'll assist you. I'll work for free. I'll do whatever it takes. And a lot of these people I'm even seeing in the audience, and Dave especially, were there helping me reach the levels I got to now just through assisting them and learning the ropes through them. So if anyone has the resources of people who are doing your dream job, I suggest you approach them and try to, get in the door that way. Because if you do a good job with them, and if they're traveling or if they're unavailable, they'll recommend you for the job, since they trust you from the value you've displayed to them. So it's just kind of a revolving door. I don't know.
I love it. VA just wrote, this is not a question, but this chat's been amazing and it inspired me to post some of my favorite picks. Thanks for allowing non-members to get in on the listen. So, listen, we just wanted this for the first one to be open to everyone, because I think one of the most special aspects of this community is the interactivity with the artists themselves. And if you're looking in the Q&A, you can see the exact pieces that were bid on from Mike's collection, which are just awesome on every level. Dave, can I go back to you for a second on Drive? So I remember vividly when you dropped Drive, because my entire Instagram feed, and I follow a lot of artists and Instagram, and my entire Twitter feed was all of these people that just kept on posting really cool photos, and I get it, and I understand sort of when what you said with putting the constraints on, and it's really fascinating and interesting. But when I started to look deeper at it, Drive is part of a bigger ecosystem that you're developing. No?
Yeah, that's true. That's a really great point. I'm actually going to drop the link to that in the Q&A if people want to check it out, and I'll tell you why I did this. And it's probably obviously now I consider it the best decision I ever made in my life. But back in I don't know, 2013, I started to get really popular on photography Instagram, and it was a great way to community build. And
by the way, I admire your modesty.
I'm very popular. Thank you, Keith. Not at all. But the point being is that enough people DM'd me asking me, they're like, I have $1,000 to my name. It was always some version of this. I've saved up $1,000. It's all the money I have in the world. And what camera should I buy? And I'm like, just use what you're texting me on. It's so much more important to learn how to see than it is to learn what to buy. There's nothing you can buy that's going to make you a good photographer. Literally nothing. And so I decided that instead of answering this question the same way in a million different ways, I would start a secret alternate account, and I would only post iPhone work, stuff I shot with my iPhone. And I would try to post something every day. And I found a bunch of different patterns. And one of the patterns was cars shot in. Okay, so wait, let me start at the top level. Secret Street, my constraints were, it has to be shot on an iPhone. There can't be any paid apps involved. There'd be very minimal edits, just color. And I would try to post once a day. And it had to fit this kind of general vibe, which is kind of New York noir. So kind of this, I don't know how to describe it, but just certain things fit the vibe. And my friends and I, and Mike can attest to this, we have this joke where we'll be walking down the street and I'll be like, and one of them, or I'll be like, ooh, Secret Street. So if you want to see the vibe, you can go check the link I just posted. But point is, when people started to ask me, what camera should I buy, blah, 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 I was like, I would just send them that account and be like, I really like this guy's work. What do you think? And they'd say, oh, this stuff's great. What does he shoot on? And I say, that's me. I just shoot with an iPhone. And then they'd inevitably, be like, oh, that's really interesting, and reconsider how to approach learning the craft of photography. And that was my goal. And it was just a passion project. But what it led me to is it led me to be constantly photographing, because at every single moment, I always had a camera on me because I always had my phone. And so as I saw these patterns unfolding in front of me, I would take them more and more. Fast forward to all the way through the years to NFTs. And once I started to see photo collections doing well, I was like, oh my God, I've been doing this for 10 years. And then I was also very interested in gamifying collections and incentivizing creativity within our communities. And so I took, 111 of my favorite cars. I held back 20 of my favorite ones. And I said, this is our community reserve. And if you hold one of these cars, you can play these creative games with me. And it's funny that Mike's on stage right now because he actually won our second race. And our second race was who can make the best photograph in the style of drive. And Keith, it was really cool because 125 people submitted their photography to this collection, and to this contest. And, we ended up voting in our Discord, and Mike ended up getting the most votes for drive holders. But it was really fascinating to see, and especially the fact that some people had never considered themselves a photographer, but they had the same tool that I made this collection with, and they were able to go out, participate in the craft. And now you can even see on my page right now, like on my Twitter, people tag me all day in drive style photos. And I'm like, it was like NFTs can be the seeds for creative universes. And I'm really, really passionate about that.
So I will tell you, I looked at your entire collection of drive, and like it does mess with your mind. And then like when I then looked at all of Alejandro's collection, where he shoots from a top looking down, right? Like it was like the weirdest sort of readjustment of my perspective on everything. You said something, and then there's a few questions that I want to go into, but you made this comment about how to see. And like as photographers, I mean, that's your profession, is how to see. And like, what is your advice on how to see? Like, how do you see? Like, and then like, I'd love both of you to answer like that.
That's a great question. So photography is the art of observation, in my opinion. I practice photography 24/7. Even in my dreams, I'm literally practicing photography. And I don't mean that literally that I'm always taking pictures. I mean that I'm always looking at the world around me and looking into the infinite details of everything and the interactions of physics that are like bubbling all around us. And I'm just curious. If I see like the light refracting through a glass in a beam of sunlight, and the light coming out the other end of that glass is tinted yellow because it's a beer or something, that fascinates me endlessly. I'm curious about every overlap and every interaction, and that's what being a photographer is. And the more you do it, the more you see. So it's this incredibly addictive rabbit hole of curiosity. And if you can just embrace that, it honestly bleeds over into every other aspect of my life. I'm more observant of the way I speak. I'm more observant of the way the dynamics in my friendships and relationships and my family, and I'm more observant of the food I eat, and I'm more careful when I cook. I like the chemistry of it and the combination and the variables in that. So a way to see is, if I could boil it down to one word, it's to stay curious and to understand like life is such a fleeting and precious gift we have. And so the idea of like ever being bored is like an astounding concept to me, because it's just so amazing that we're here at all. So that's my opinion. It's just if you can stay curious and don't just take things for granted at face value, then the rest will just come naturally. Just enjoy the ride.
I love that. And Mike, your thoughts on how to see?
Yeah, so I truly believe, and that's something I often show in my work, I believe, is that there's beauty everywhere. Like I love showing beauty in the mundane. Like even garbage on the street can be done photographically in an artistic fashion. A lot with street photography, it's a little bit different seeing things because it's such a fast, fleeting moment that you kind of have to practice to get good at it. A lot of stuff comes from like anticipating a moment, or if like you see someone, you initially see someone do something, like maybe they're smoking a cigarette and they just took a drag, and there's another one coming, because there's like so much repetition in human behavior. A lot of times if you just like you see a moment happen and you're like, oh, I missed it, it's like, wait, just like take a step back and slow down, because it's probably going to happen again. So a lot of it's just observing life and human behavior and psychology, and just at least when I'm shooting, that's kind of stuff I use when I'm looking for stuff to photograph. Also, ways to learn how to see, at least like with composition and photographically speaking. I like to study a lot of other people's photographs, or like the greats before me. Also, you don't even have to focus on like old photography. Like whenever I'm watching movies, I'm like looking at where the camera puts the actors, and like what focal length they might be using, and or like the focus, or movies are just a moving image. So DPs, directors of photography in movies, are setting all those angles and the lenses and the positioning of everything and the lighting. So there's a lot to be learned, even just watching a movie, or just looking at paintings too. It's all the same. So I'm pretty much kind of like Dave. Like I'm just observing. I'm like a sponge. I'm trying to learn every second that my eyes are open.
God, I love that. Jack Simpson in the audience had a question that is interesting. He goes, "Does value driven by scarcity apply to street photography, or does the craft demand a large body of work to show proof of value?" In your opinions?
Can you say that one more time? Because I was answering another
So,
question in the chat.
oh no, no worries. I could see you're quite the multitasker and very popular apparently on Instagram. Um,
I don't know who
you know,
said that.
wait. So the question from Jack Simpson, when we talk about scarcity quite a bit, right? And that scarcity drives value. The question was really, does that apply to street photography, or does the craft of street photography demand a larger body of work to show that, like, you didn't just get lucky once with one great photo?
That's interesting. That's a really interesting question, Jack. Thank you. First of all, I love Jack's work. Jack is an incredible street photographer, and just a quick plug, I'm gonna host a room with him at 7 p.m. to talk about street photography. I'll drop a link to that so we can get even deeper with Jack. But to
Awesome.
answer that question, I think the beauty of what's happening with NFTs, when we say scarcity, Jack, we mean market scarcity. And so what NFTs have given us is a market for the first time that is a true kind of like art market for digital work. Um, and what that means to me is that you should be very prolific in your sharing of photography on like Web2 platforms like Instagram and Twitter, for example. But when it comes to actually committing things to the chain, that's when you start to get a little more focused on scarcity. Um, but I think the more important balance is scarcity versus community. Um, when I first started minting just photography, I was dropping one of ones on super rare, and I was very very scarcely. Even still, I have minted very little there because that's like my most like premier one of ones. And I had a lot of trouble getting traction and finding collectors. Um, and one of the reasons is I didn't have enough pieces out to have a strong community of collectors. So when I dropped Drive, part of the intention there was to price things really low. The lowest Drive pieces were like 0.25 or something. And what that did was it gave me 90 new collectors. And that's 90 new people on my team. So what you want to do is find the balance, and whether you do it with two collections like I did, or you can do it somehow with your own take on that. The key is you want to keep your market scarce, but your community robust. And basically that's just, you have to kind of identify the balance between the supply, the available market supply of what you're putting out versus the demand for who wants it. And the worst case scenario is that your supply far exceeds the demand and everything just sits there and then no one's interested. the key is that you always want the demand for your work to exceed your supply. So as you're thinking about what to put out, I would start small, keep it relatively scarce, and then as you build, you can start expanding your community of your collectors. That would be my advice on the scarcity issue. Mike, I don't know if you
I don't have much to add. That was pretty good. I'm still figuring out the balance between the two also. One suggestion I would make is that when you're like scarcity and curation kind of go hand in hand, one thing I would do that I kind of regret doing is I put a lot of my best work into collections, not like the one I just did today, but like I did a previous couple collections, and I think that I could have probably saved some of those and developed my community a bit more and then minted those as one of ones instead of putting them at lower price points, because now they're gone forever. So I think that it's just something to keep in mind that just hold your best stuff back to maybe you get a little bit of momentum going, and then you can use those for a better platform or situation.
Now, let me ask you, just because if you have questions, we're winding down. We have a few more minutes left, and please throw it out. And I always love to throw the questions to the audience. Is there a photograph that either of you took in the over the course of your career that you're just like, this is the one that I'm most proud of? Like, this is my favorite picture, or do you just like each one individually?
For me, it's so hard when people ask that. Even like I just went on a month-long trip to Europe and everyone's like, what's your favorite photo? What's your favorite place? And every photo is so different from each other, or like everything's so like there's personal moments attached to it, or it's hard to pick. Like I love things for different reasons. So for me, my favorite photos for some reason turn out to be like the last shooting session I just did. Maybe because it's so fresh, but it's like I'm always so excited to get home and like review my photos and edit them and whatnot. So like my last time shooting was always like my favorite photos, but I like can't think single-handedly of like like a career changing photo. I know it's probably way different for other people and they can just think of one photo. Maybe Dave, you have a photo you can recall offhand?
Yeah, I do. I have a few in mind. I was trying to find the link to one, but one was photographing the 2017 eclipse. I went down to Nashville in the path of totality, and that was a really like mind-bending and moving experience for me. Also Instagram, like at Instagram, like the official account, reposted it and tagged me, and I got like, I don't know, 15,000 followers that day. And that kind of gave me a lot of opportunities. And that photo actually won like a shorty award for Instagram of the year. And I got a lot of work through that. And like, it really was just like a catalyst moment in my career for sure. There's a photo I took in Paris. I'm going to try to find it because I think it's relative. I haven't been posting a lot on Instagram, so I think I could probably find it. But in terms of like what I look for in specifically in a street photograph, this photo that I was able to capture in Paris was like extremely important to me, so to speak. I'm trying to dig it up. I don't know if there's another question we can hit in the meantime. Um uh where is this? I don't know, Keith, you got another question before we wrap up or no?
No, I mean, I just want to say thank you to both of you. I mean, Dave, I've been a huge fan of yours for quite some time, and I'm so excited that you're part of this next drop that's coming up in the coming weeks. And Mike, like just getting to know you more and your inspiration in this conversation and seeing your work, and seeing both of the pieces that both of you submitted, and I cannot wait until we make them all public for everyone, is just so awesome. And I can't thank you both enough for taking the hour to join us, and to everyone who joined us today. And over 250 people in the room, and I just I can't tell you how much I appreciate it. And I think that both of you are doing great work. And Dave, I know you're doing another Spaces later tonight. If you want to give the details and put it into the chat so everyone can see it. Lane, I'll turn it over to you. Do we have a PO-op tonight?
We do have a PO-op tonight. So because we were able to open this talk up to our whole community, which is so amazing, and thank you, Dave and Mike, for being like the absolute best people to kick off our 2022 Artist Talks with. Like, what an amazing conversation. We're going to handle this PO-op, though, just like we do for our town halls. So for everyone who's familiar with this process, what you're going to do is put your wallet address in the Artist Talk PO-op list channel. That will remain open, and we will issue the PO-op tomorrow, probably afternoon. I'll drop the design so if everyone can see it in the Q&A.
Is it a blue bandana? Is it a blue bandana?
It is unfortunately not the blue bandana. Now that you say that, that probably...
I feel like there's like such a huge missed opportunity.
Did I miss that opportunity?
Keith, I want my own time drop for like a 10,000 bandanas, okay? We'll talk offline.
I totally blew it with this. So anyway, the PO-op's a lot more anticlimactic than the blue bandana, but still really fun, and I dropped in the Q&A for those who want to see it.
And by the way, Lane, just as you finish this up, Cheese, of course, writes when PO-op. Just so everyone knows, Dave Krugman dreams photography. Lane Little dreams when PO-op. Okay.
It's nightmares.
on that note, I will say thank you to everyone. Join Dave Krugman's Spaces at 7. He is feeling super talkative tonight. He's very important. He has a lot of followers.
I'm never gonna live this down.
But you two are really, really incredible talents, and I can't thank you enough. And to everyone in the audience, thank you as well for joining us tonight for the first Artist Talks of 2022. And on that, I'm going to end the room in 3, 2, 1.
Thank you guys.
Thank you all.
Appreciate you all.